At 99 years old, Mel Brooks isn't holding anything back anymore, and his latest confession hits Hollywood like a thunderclap. The legendary comic mind behind Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein has finally revealed the 5 actors he absolutely could not stand working with. No filters, no diplomacy, just nearly a century of memories and century-old grudges spilling into the spotlight. Guess who they are? Jerry Lewis. Behind closed doors, Brooks described Lewis with a mix of awe and exhaustion. Brilliant, draining, impossible. He admired the mad genius who had spent decades perfecting slapstick mayhem, the virtuoso of absurdity whose influence echoed through comedy. But admiration for the craft didn't translate into affection for the man. The real breaking point arrived in the mid-1980s during early work on Life Stinks, a sharp social satire about a billionaire forced into homelessness. When the studio floated Lewis's name for a major supporting role, claiming his involvement would elevate the project, Brooks shut it down instantly. "I don't need someone who thinks he's funnier than the film," he told his producer. Brooks knew Lewis's reputation far too well. Lewis had a habit of rewriting scenes mid-take, fighting directors over every syllable and gesture, and overwhelming every room with sheer force of personality. Brooks, who thrived on controlled madness but never surrendered authority, saw immediately that their methods would clash. He guarded his creative space fiercely, whether in the edit room, on the soundstage, or in the delicate timing of a scene. Their one meeting came at a neutral zone dinner arranged by a mutual acquaintance. Brooks walked in open-minded, curious whether the partnership might somehow work. Lewis swept in late, launched into a non-stop monologue about the future of American comedy, and barely acknowledged his would-be collaborator. Brooks listened, choosing his responses sparingly, then excused himself early. No fight, no dramatic exit. Just a simple conclusion: they could never work together. Reflecting later, Brooks put it bluntly, "I wanted applause." After that night, he never reconsidered the idea. On the surface, they maintained civility. Brooks never mocked Lewis publicly. Lewis rarely mentioned Brooks at all, but those within Hollywood understood the truth. There was no affection between them and no sense of missed opportunity, only the reality of two incompatible temperaments. As Brooks remarked to a friend, "If someone sees themselves as the center of the universe, they can't live in mine. I already have a son." Brooks built comedy like an architect. Ensemble first, structure before chaos, rhythm above ego. His worlds allowed stars to shine, but only if they recognized the production as a universe, not a spotlight. Lewis couldn't do that. His ego wouldn't allow it. Working with him, Brooks believed, would have been catastrophic, not because Lewis lacked talent, but because of the turmoil that would follow. Rewrites, explosions of temper, fights for control, endless back and forth, and the slow draining of the ensemble's energy. Too loud, too overwhelming, too late in his career to change. In truth, there was never a scene written for Lewis, never an approach from Brooks, not even a tentative phone call, only a distant admiration for a comic legend who made millions laugh, but could not function inside Brooks' ecosystem. Even genius has limits. In Brooks' universe, talent alone never guaranteed entry. What mattered were trust, timing, humility, and the willingness to serve the story rather than dominate it. Some actors were passed over because they lacked ability. Others, like Jerry Lewis, overflowed with it. What they lacked was the one essential trait Brooks demanded: the capacity to play wholeheartedly and selflessly within the comedy. Gene Wilder. For Mel Brooks, no professional wound cut deeper than the quiet unraveling of his bond with Gene Wilder, the man he once hailed as his artistic twin flame. Wilder wasn't simply another performer drifting through Brooks's universe. He was a co-conspirator in the reinvention of comedy itself. Together, they didn't just craft films, they detonated expectations. Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, these weren't mere successes, but seismic events, wicked and brilliant, stitched together by Wilder's tremulous sincerity and razor-sharp timing. He brought a kind of electrical tenderness to Brooks's wildness, transforming chaos into magic. But after Young Frankenstein, the ground between them began to shift. Wilder had given everything to that film, shaping its script, molding its heart, steadying its tone. Brooks, with his relentless drive and meticulous eye, fought to protect its vision. insisting it remain black and white, insisting it stay true to their shared instincts. They made something immortal. And yet, buried beneath the applause, fault lines began to form. Wilder had a new script, The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes's Smarter Brother, a story he'd written, dreamed of directing, and fully expected Brooks to shepherd as producer. But Brooks declined, not out of malice nor lack of faith in the material. Gene just wasn't ready to direct. I knew he wasn't, he later said. Wilder heard that reasoning not as protection, but as rejection. He had hoped for partnership, mentorship, an extension of the magic they'd forged. Instead, he felt a door quietly close. He made the movie anyway. Feldman, Kahn, the familiar faces were there, but the old alchemy was missing. Their shared warmth had cooled. The rhythms were off. What once felt effortless now felt forced, as though the constellation they built together had scattered. In the years that followed, they drifted apart, not with fireworks or public accusations, but with silence. No interviews dissecting blame, no sharp-edged jokes from either man. Just two former collaborators walking parallel paths that no longer intersected. Brooks confided to a friend, "It was like watching your brother pack his bags and leave home, only he left carrying your best punchline." And in Brooks's fiercely loyal world, that absence left a lingering ache. When they finally encountered each other again, by chance, not design, there was no sweeping reunion. A handshake, a few gentle jokes, the thaw of something once frozen, a fragile reconnection, but not a restoration. The trust that had defined their golden era stayed fractured. Brooks had once relied on Wilder to complete thoughts he hadn't yet spoken, to fill scenes instinctively, to elevate ideas before they had shapes. After Smarter Brother, that sacred loop had closed. Wilder walked away, and Brooks, ever protective of his creative circle, never reopened the door for a second departure. Chevy Chase. Through the 1980s and well into the early 90s, Chevy Chase's name resurfaced again and again in conversations around Mel Brooks's projects. Studios pushed hard. They wanted marquee power in Brooks's films, and Chase was exactly that. A recognizable face, a proven draw, a sly master of the dry, razored humor that had defined Saturday Night Live and carried Fletch to success. On paper, he fit Brooks's comedic DNA perfectly, but Brooks dismissed the idea every single time. The reason was simple, though rarely said aloud. Chase violated Brooks's most sacred unwritten rule. He wasn't a team player. Brooks had watched the pattern unfold from afar. In interviews, backstage chatter, and anecdotes swapped among friends, the same truth kept surfacing. Chase was sharp, blisteringly quick, and wickedly funny, yet just as capable of icing a room with a single remark or a smug lift of the eyebrow. Yes, he could command laughter, but he could also derail harmony. Brooks once told a casting director, "He's not performing, he's waiting for everyone else to stop talking so he can remind them he's the smartest guy there." For Brooks, that attitude was fatal. Comedy, in his philosophy, thrived on generosity, on actors who could hit a punchline and then gracefully hand the rhythm to someone else. He wanted collaborators who blended into the ensemble, not ones who seized it. Chevy didn't blend, he eclipsed. The closest Chase ever got to a Brooks role was Spaceballs. Studio executives suggested him for Dark Helmet. He had the voice, the dryness, the presence. Brooks barely considered it. He chose Rick Moranis instead. "Rick knows when to step forward," Brooks later said. "More importantly, he knows when to step back. Chevy only knows how to jump in." For Brooks, comedic chemistry outweighed celebrity value. Timing mattered, trust mattered, ego didn't. And in Chevy, ego often took the lead. In private, Brooks described Chase as a man who collided with comedy rather than moved with it. Always smirking, always operating at a distance. Chase could charm an audience but refused to soften into ensemble rhythm. Brooks believed comedy required sincerity, real commitment, even in the most absurd moments. Chase, in his eyes, rarely surrendered enough to believe in the moment. Irony shielded him. They did meet once, a short, stiff encounter that left no spark. Chase showed up with star swagger. Brooks arrived searching for that intangible click, the musicality of collaboration. It never appeared. They parted politely. Brooks gave him a faint diplomatic smile and said, "Maybe in another universe." Chase never crossed into Mel's years. Later, Brooks would occasionally talk around the subject, musing about actors who were too aware of themselves to be present, always careful to skip over names. When a host tried to press further, Brooks offered only a sly smile and changed the topic, leaving the rest unsaid. Harvey Korman. Harvey Korman arrived with the pedigree of the Carol Burnett Show, where he had long been the gravitational center of countless sketches. He thrived in an environment built on looseness, improv that bent the room to his will, scripts that shifted mid-breath, characters born from sudden impulses. That was his natural ecosystem. But stepping onto a Mel Brooks set meant entering a different universe entirely. Brooks didn't just direct, he composed. Every beat, every inflection, every micro-pause was part of a carefully tuned symphony. A single improvisation could topple the timing, and Korman, brilliant as he was, couldn't resist drifting off score. Their most defining clash erupted on High Anxiety. Brooks had cast him as Dr. Montague, the dignified, sinister overseer of the Psychoneurotic Institute for the Very, Very Nervous. The character was pivotal to the film's delicate absurdity. Korman, however, wanted to reinvent him from the ground up. Brand new quirks, off-the-cuff tangents, entire stretches of improvised dialogue. Brooks shut that down instantly. "We already wrote the funny part," as he said. "We just need you to do it." Korman bristled. From there, tension lingered like a hum in the walls. Korman questioned blocking, paused to re-examine jokes, nudged at lines as if reshaping them could make them better. Brooks, normally flexible, mischievous, a ringmaster of joyful chaos, began trimming conversations to seconds. What should have felt like their usual comedic electricity became, day by day, a delicate diplomatic mission. Crew members later described the mood as silent warfare. No screaming matches, no dramatic showdowns, but every exchanged glance, every note, every reading carried the weight of two strong wills refusing to bend. Brooks muttered to a producer, "Harvey wants to direct the movie. Unfortunately for him, I'm already doing that." By the last week, Brooks delivered instructions through intermediaries, while Korman spent breaks in isolation, no longer mingling with castmates. And yet on screen, none of it showed. Korman was too gifted to let tension corrupt the performance. Dr. Montague emerged pitch perfect, the comedy sharp, the tone flawless. Audiences laughed without ever glimpsing the strain behind the camera. But Brooks remembered, and he remembered the price. After High Anxiety, Korman's name vanished quietly from Brooks's casting list, not from resentment, but from drained resolve. "Some actors bring joy to a set," Brooks later said. "Harvey brought brilliance, but the brilliance came with friction." There was no public fallout, no tabloid flameout, just two professionals recognizing the boundary of their partnership. Korman publicly praised Brooks for years afterward, and Brooks openly credited Korman for elevating some of his finest work, but they never reunited on a film. The rhythm, Mel's sacred, invisible rhythm, had been disrupted. Brooks could handle big personalities, unpredictable energies, even outright diva behavior. But once collaboration transformed into a tug-of-war, once the dance became a duel, the joy left the process. And for Brooks, joy was the lifeblood of comedy. Frank Langella. Mel Brooks was deep into the early stages of Dracula. Dead and Loving It, a project built on whirlwind energy, gags flying like shrapnel, visual comedy stacked on absurdity, and a vampire who existed halfway between menace and full-blown buffoonery. Enter Frank Langella, stage royalty, the man who had already mesmerized Broadway audiences as Dracula. Tall, elegant, magnetic, he carried a regal darkness wherever he went. On paper, he was Dracula, brooding, sophisticated, hypnotic. And ironically, that was exactly why he didn't fit. Brooks wasn't chasing gothic romance or shadowy atmosphere. He wasn't after a tortured immortal with centuries of sorrow etched into his cheekbones. He wanted velocity. He wanted chaos, a Dracula who could seduce a room with perfect diction one moment, then accidentally fling himself into a fireplace the next. Langella arrived carrying Shakespearean thunder. Brooks needed controlled mayhem. From the moment rehearsals began, the tonal collision was glaring. Sessions dragged. Brooks, normally a maestro of improvisation and comedic frenzy, found himself tiptoeing around Langella's solemnity. Langella didn't volley jokes back. He didn't loosen up. He spoke every line like it was part of a cathedral sermon, heavy with gravitas. He wasn't playing Dracula, Brooks later joked privately. He was playing a martyr. Brooks tried soft steering at first, gentle adjustments, encouragement toward looseness, even playful nudges into silliness. Langella listened attentively, nodded respectfully, and then returned, like a knight returning to his post, to the same somber, unyielding performance. Cast members exchanged uncertain glances. Crew whispered, half jokingly, half concerned, "Are we filming a comedy or a grand opera?" The production's rhythm was beginning to wobble under the weight of Langella's seriousness. Then came the moment that ended the experiment. During a test read, Brooks handed Langella one of those quintessential Brooks setups, dramatic tension designed to collapse into pure slapstick gold. Langella paused, confused, and asked in complete sincerity, "Do you want me to mock the text?" Brooks, after a long stare, murmured, "No, I want you to survive it." And with that, the truth was undeniable. Langella was performing in a different universe. By week's end, the split happened quietly. No blow-up, no bad blood, just a dignified exit. And into the vacuum stepped Leslie Nielsen, a master of straight-faced lunacy. Nielsen possessed a rare ability to maintain total seriousness while the world melted into chaos around him. He wasn't the haunted gothic Dracula Langella embodied. He was the comedic anchor Brooks needed, a vampire who could slip on a rug and make it look like destiny. What do you think about the names Mel Brooks disliked? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.